Good morning, friends. Thanks for being here this morning. This is Journey Home Meditation's morning sit. This morning we're going to do just a brief session of shared breathing and a little contemplation and some meditative practice, and we might get to a poem. We'll see how we feel. But I'm Michael, and I'm very happy to be here today. So thanks for taking time in your day to, even if you're not actively practicing the practices, even just sitting with this kind of content, I think, is helpful. How we eat, how we consume things, what we listen to, what we surround ourselves with, what is in our visual landscape, all of these ways in which we are experiencing our sensations of the world. It teaches us. It teaches us how we fit into this place. And it guides us and instructs us on how to get the things that we need to live and survive in this context. And you could just as easily be spending this time imbibing on, political content that gets you angry and pushes you to one side or another, and that's something that most of us do. Most of us tend to seek out media that informs us in a way that also informs our identities and our biases. It's all right. It's what we do. But I think in taking the time, even just a few minutes out of our mornings, to bring our attention to our breath, bring our attention to practices that surround giving ourselves the gift of calm for even just a bit in our day. I think that that's a pretty beautiful thing and a pretty helpful thing for the world, that we all are here for this reason. We're all here because we want to be. We want to be settled inside of our own bodies, and maybe we're all here for very different reasons, but we're all here around the practice of the breath. And that's a good thing. So thanks for choosing this morning over the doom scroll or whatever other mental junk food we can feed ourselves first thing in the mornings. Okay, all that said, let's take a few breaths, settle into our bodies and settle our bodies into this place. Taking time for a pause before we begin is one of the most valuable teachings I've learned, and I've learned it from multiple teachers. There's always some quality to the experience that I have with the different teachers and different people. Some of them would not call themselves teachers, but they've been my teachers. People that in my life have taught me either by showing me, mostly by showing me, or by giving me teachings on how important it is to take a few moments to breathe and to settle into that place inside of our gut instinct, that centering of ourselves into our own bodies, Before we start conversations or answer questions or before we move from one thing to the next, it's important to refocus and recenter so that we can actually give our attention to those who are in front of us. I think that that's part of the wonder of the doom scroll generation, is that we have this capacity to have our attention be split amongst all of these different things, and it's so quick. 8 to 12 seconds, 15 seconds, and you're on to the next. Sometimes not even that long. Sometimes you have less than a second to decide whether or not you want to give your attention to this thing, and then you move on to the next. And meanwhile, you're doing all these other things. Training ourselves in that way is really limiting our capacity to bring anything in. And I'm not going to be this person that's like teaching the horrors and tragic fears of technology in our modern day. I think that there's plenty of information out there for anybody who wants to learn about that aspect of our current culture, dominant culture. And I'm not discounting any of that. But the thing that interests me right now in my life is the ways in which I am learning how to receive and to give. My capacity to receive is being taught to me by the way that I take in information. And so the quality of my communications with people who have been able to develop a practice of taking time to slow down, take just a few breaths, collect themselves before they engage, I felt really seen by them, and I felt what that is to really receive someone's attention. And it's a much different thing. I didn't walk away feeling hungry. I didn't walk away from that feeling unsatiated. So let's take a few breaths together. Breathing in through the nose to the bottom of the belly. And let's invite the bell. So in that practice, you can even begin to shift and adjust the way that you're receiving even breath, even the way that we're breathing in and breathing out. This is part of why this practice is so important, is that the way that we are receiving breath and releasing breath is going to inform and sort of bring texture to our day. That's going to be the way that we meet everything in that time, So when we find that when we take that pause, that we're hunched down and we're closed down and we're breathing shallow, or we might be breathing in a way that doesn't really fill our bodies, that's why we're so hunched over. You're limited. You can try it right now, when in your seat. Try closing your body down, crossing your arms, closing your shoulders down, and then just try to take a deep filled breath in this way. There's strain and pressure, and we don't even notice often that we're doing that in our day. And we're sitting throughout the day, I have to recheck my posture 100 times a day at least, because my learned habits of how to hold my body is to close down. And there's probably a number of reasons for that. Being a larger person for my entire life, you want to be smaller. Yeah. Same thing if you're a smaller person, oftentimes you learn to, take a different posture. You can see that with teenage boys especially, the way that they walk, they'll puff their chest and they'll put their arms out to make themselves appear bigger. I don't think they're doing it consciously. I know that I didn't do that consciously when I was a kid, but there is the way that we position our bodies is the way that we take a position in the world. And so for myself, both with insecurities about the way that my body looks, as well as learned responses to times when I am speaking out and sharing a deep, vulnerable thing. I've always been a pretty emotionally charged person. So I get, I think the kind word people use, I think they mean it in kindness, is he's very passionate. But I've received back input through my whole life that that's you're too much, and so I closed down. And also, after enough time, this is just the comfortable way to hold my body. I sit in this crouched position, and so I'm having to relearn how to hold my body, how to hold myself. And in doing that and learning how to hold my body, I'm also learning how to be held. I'm being held by this body. And when I change this position, it changes the way I breathe, which changes the way I receive sustenance, it changes the way I release the things I'm holding on to. And all that is just a little bit of shift, just a small shift at that center point. I talk about the fulcrum. That center point where balance is occurring is on that fulcrum. And, it's the smallest shift at the fulcrum is a large difference at the other side. My friend Bodhi, he talks about it in a way I like. He says, you only have to turn the steering wheel an inch to go to a completely different place down the road. I like that visualization. So finding the place in my body where I have trained myself in how to receive and how to release. This has been an important place for my attention to go in my practice. So paying attention to my posture throughout the day is a way that I'm relearning how to hold myself and how to be held. And that's helpful. There's a teaching in different schools of Buddhism that talk about the hungry ghost. And I think I first learned about the hungry ghost from Thich Nhat Hanh. Thich Nhat Hanh, the fantastic teacher, of Zen Buddhism, and in the Plum Village tradition. Plum Village is the monastery that Thich Nhat Hanh started and lived in, died in. He teaches about the hungry ghost. He talks about meeting hungry ghosts in the work that he does. And the hungry ghost in the Buddhist teaching is the story of these people who are hardly recognizable as being people anymore. And a lot of the characteristics that they share are that of having a large belly but a very small throat. He describes it as being as small as a needle. And what this creates is a person whose appetite is insatiable, but their ability to receive nourishment is extremely limited. So they're always searching for more, always hungry. They're never filled. And the way that Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this is also not just as them as an individual, but talks about them as a part of a community. And he says, when we are the hungry ghost, we can't even receive the nourishment that someone is offering. And he says, so no matter how much we have to give someone, they can't receive it. And this changed my view of the hungry ghost over time as I went back to his teachings, because I would learn about the hungry ghost from different teachers. And often it was a way to, at least in my lens of being raised in the church here, the Christian church, with a different set of moral standards and practices that revolve a lot around punishment. A lot of the ways that the hungry ghost is taught is sort of like, this is who you'll be, this is the punishment you'll receive if you do this or this wrong. But that's not the teaching that I found when I went to the source teachings, and when I came through the lens of Thich Nhat Hanh. It was talking more about how these are community aspects. These are aspects of the way that people learn how to develop these ways of receiving and releasing. And I started to imagine this morning, as I was thinking about this, wanting this to be sort of a basis for my contemplation this morning, because it's something I think about often in the work that I do, is I imagine, what if I had to learn, if I can think about the entirety of the evolution of the species in this short one life experience, right? What if I had to relearn that entire evolution about my throat, how I eat, how I receive things? And the only way I could do that is learning by how I'm being fed by those in my life. Then there are people who wouldn't have, many of us who wouldn't have those experiences of being able to be nourished and being able to receive fully, because the people that are teaching us, they also never had someone teaching them the ways to best receive and be fulfilled. And so we have to learn these ways, oftentimes from unhealthy sources as well. I don't know if I'm being clear with that. Trying to remove judgment and just bring understanding. That the way a lot of us learn how to receive is strained at best. And letting go is just as, or even more difficult, because it's really part of the same process. The letting go and the receiving, it's the exact same thing. My capacity to receive is dependent upon and only as large as my capacity to release. It's that simple. If I have a 12-ounce cup and I'm only letting out 4 ounces at a time, I can only receive 4 ounces into that cup. So my capacity to receive and to release, it's part of the same process. They're not opposites, they're the same. And I think about that in terms of the way I hold my body. Right? For instance, it's informing not just my emotional capacity, it's literally informing my physical and biological capacity. And so I am insatiable. I become a person who can't be filled and nourished in the same way because I'm only allowing myself to receive and release the bare minimum. So learning that practice of opening our bodies, it's starting to teach us a bit. And then you start touching into these different things. When you take a pause right now, let's take a pause, 3 breaths. Really try to open those nasal passageways. When you breathe in, hold yourself open. And release entirely. And hold yourself open and receive. And release. So, spend this time just recognizing what feeling might be arising, what might be coming up. And what I always find to be quite mind-blowing and helpful and enriching and deep and all of these things is how much I'm holding that just wants to come out of me. It wants to bloom out of me. It's usually wrapped in love and sorrow and all of these things that are about everyone around me and everything around me. The love wants to pour out and coat the world around me. The sorrow, the sadness, it's for my place in this world and this ever-leaving world. There's sadness there all the time. And it's beautiful all the time. And that's when it comes back to the hungry ghost is not an isolated island of existence, but this is a part of a community, and this is a part of who I am. This is an aspect of me that at some point maybe I didn't learn how to be satiated, and sometimes that comes through. And so I don't think that these teachings are about others. I think these teachings are about the aspects of ourselves. These are each an aspect. An aspect is one way of seeing, is what that word means. And that's just one way of seeing our world and our place in it. And, Gabor Mate sort of made that term, the hungry ghost, a little more accessible, a little more popular in the West when he wrote a book about addiction, referring to the hungry ghost as a teaching about addiction. And it's wonderful. It's a wonderful understanding of what addiction feels like, but again, that comes down to an aspect of identity. So many people that are hungry ghosts at times are representing the hungry ghost would not see themselves as suffering from addiction because maybe they don't do narcotics, they don't do drugs, they don't drink alcohol or smoke cigarettes. Maybe they're not even addicted to binge eating or something that's recognizable, but there's still this thing that we have that I believe is the center point of addiction, and it's not the substance. Addiction is fueled by avoidance. It's what we avoid. What we avoid in what we're able to feel, what we avoid in what we are able to process, what we avoid in how we are able to receive and release. That's really the center point of addiction, and that's really the condition of the hungry ghost. And so on my drive in this morning, I was just thinking about avoidance. And avoidance, for me, includes consciousness. It includes like having a conscious awareness that I'm avoiding it. Otherwise, I don't see it. I don't see my avoidance as avoidance. I see it as protection, or I see it as desire. Oftentimes I see the things that I'm avoiding as actually just seeing it for the desire that I'm experiencing. I desire this thing. I don't see that as avoidance, you know. So, but when I bring my attention and my awareness to that place of desire, I can see what's behind it more often. And that's what we're talking about here. We are talking about where we bring our attention and how we bring our attention. So we start with the breath. Let's have 3 breaths, and then let's look at some Appalachian elegy and see what bell hook's magic has for us today. 3 breaths together. Breathing in. And releasing. Breathing in. And letting go. And receiving. And release. Okay. It has been some time since I sat with you all and with this book in my hands. I'm going to have to take a second to find where we are. So I believe we are on number 36 today. Because I believe the last one I remember reading was number 35. It begins, winds of fate, take the air, push it past the known in this world of nature no one can undo. Mystery abounds, harsh cold burns skin, fire waits. Raging tempests sweep us, carry us forward, destiny recorded, written down, past, present, future, change comes. That's the last one I believe we read together. So let's see what number 36 has for us today. And here's the cover of the book. Bell Hooks, Appalachian Elegy, Poetry and Place. Mammoth Caves. Places alive before the invention of ours, Paleolithic hunters painting the caves of Lascaux, horses shot with arrows, wild creatures no longer seen, cave dwellers searching for sacred paths, then sharing revelation on these walls, connecting caves, crossing boundaries of nation and time, bold remains of untouched history. What is a cave? What is this that Bell Hooks is talking about here? It's not lost on me that we are in Cave Junction, where the Beside Meditation Hall is, and we have cave systems all around us and underneath us. And I also grew up in Appalachia, and there are cave systems all through Appalachia, and my family lived in the Ozarks, and again, cave systems all through there. And then in Tucson, New Mexico, all of this area. So I've lived my life above caves pretty consistently. Most of us have. Caverns, these places that are deep under the surface. But in this context, the idea of the cave here is bringing back this time that we kind of we picture our far distant ancestors, so distant even that we can't really put a face to them. Most of us, we don't see our faces in these ancestors when we think of them. Most of us see this kind of caricature of the cave person, the Neanderthal kind of, features, and we don't think about it as being something even closer to us in our ancestry, separated by not that many generations, actually. So living just under the surface. And when you're talking about Appalachia, you're also talking about cultures of mining. Bell Hooks here is just talking about not just these ancient cave dwellers. I mean, she is talking about them, but it's bringing into the awareness that, her people, our people of today are cave dwellers. They're digging down in these old places and extracting and pulling these things out. But she says, searching for sacred paths, then sharing revelation on these walls, connecting caves, crossing boundaries of nation and time, bold remains of untouched history. So even if all the digging and excavating, there's the word cave is in there, all of that we can do, we can still leave our history untouched if we aren't aware of it, if we aren't aware of where we come from. So I think it is very relevant to this discussion about how we are learning to be satiated, how we are learning to receive, how we are learning to release, and the cultures that are informing it right now. When we have these sort of pathways written on the walls by those who came before us, trying to tell us, trying to show us these connections and these ways to move through the world, and we aren't seeing it, we aren't connecting to it, then we're going to experience these disconnected ways of being in the world. Our ancestors have been here for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions, countless generations have been here, forging these life ways, and in just a few hundred years, we've completely shifted the way that we live on this earth. And in just a couple of hundred years, it's gotten really drastic to a point where many of us feel alien here. When we feel like we actually don't know how to fit into place. And this is happening on an ecological, environmental, and biological level, and it's also occurring on an emotional level and a spiritual plane. We have spirituality that takes us away from our bodies and away from our planet and away from our communities and away from our connections. And this is that depth of avoidance that I was saying kind of drives addiction. And that's all in the teachings of the hungry ghost. So really it's coming down to the way that we meet our community today. How do you meet your community today? If your community today consists of the air in your room and the dust on the sill and the way the light is coming in through the window, then that's your community today. How do you greet it? How do you receive it? Or if your community is teaching in a school of, 60 young people, or if your community today is in a hospital or in a jail, wherever you are, how you're meeting your community, how you're receiving that community, and what you're releasing into that community, that's all going to begin with 3 breaths that you take before you do anything else. And you're going to take those breaths either way. But bringing that attention, that consciousness there can allow you and allow us that space for loving kindness. Let's create that space for loving kindness today. And then the question becomes, what does love ask of you today? Can you hear what love is asking of you? What is it that is needed today? So thanks for being here this morning. I know we are here for some time today, so I appreciate your patience, and let's go ahead and close out with just a few more shared breaths together. There's a richness and a deliciousness to the practice of knowing that there are others right now who are gathered around these ideas, others who are gathered around these practices. And when I go out into my world today, I don't know who it is that's hearing these teachings, whether it's in this shared practice here or from other places. I don't know, so I can just assume that somebody today is watching their breath. And I'm comforted by that. And then I can also know that there are so many of us today who are experiencing the expression of the hungry ghost. And the only thing that the hungry ghost needs is that teacher of community. Not one person teaching them, but a community of people holding that space and being a gentle landing space for those who just need to come down, reground, and land. So let's figure out how we're holding ourselves so we can learn how to hold others. Just a few breaths. I'll invite the bell one final time. Thanks for being here, friends. If you haven't yet, go check out Journey Home on Facebook. And there is a Monday afternoon group that we have called Life Support. And there's a Zoom link that we put up every Monday on our Facebook page. And I believe it is, if it's not yet on our website, it will be. But for now, the social media platforms are going to be the best place, I think, to try to find that link. So if you have the opportunity to go to Facebook today, do that. And I'll try to make sure to get that weekly Zoom link up on our website if it's not currently, which our website is journeyhome.care, C-A-R-E. But check out our Facebook page, Journey Home Support Services, which I believe it's just listed under Journey Home. And look for that link today and join us. It's Mondays at 3:30 to 5 p.m., either in person here at our home location or online. It's a hybrid group. And we'll be talking more about these kind of teachings later today. So thanks so much. I'm being blinded by the sun coming in, so I can't really see what I'm doing. All right. Goodbye.